Yeah. I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
Damn. Those of you missing context, a short while back I made a video called 1D&D Ain't Looking Good. Now, I'll level with you. That video was hastily thrown together as an unstructured rant that came from within. It goes on to a bit of a tangent because there was no select thing that I was referring to. Clearly, my words caused a bit of a reaction within the community as it got metric shit ton of traction. Far more than I was actually expecting it to, because if I did, I wouldn't have had to make this video to clarify my position in the first place. And it became a bit of a hot topic for debate. So before I continue, I first and foremost want to thank each of you who viewed, liked, and a definite thanks to all of you who took time to comment, whether you agreed or not. Except for one guy, but
He can wait for his turn right at the end of the queue.
as a result of my unstructured rant, which lacked certain points where I should have further clarified my position or what I meant by my words, it meant there was a lot of room for people to guess what I meant. Indeed, while there were a great many of those who felt in strong agreement for my points in the video, there were also a great many of those who felt I did not put forward my case strongly enough, or that my argument was flimsy, which to be fair in some places it really was. So, here we are. More than double the sub count, 6k views and more than 100 comments later. I'd like to give this one more shot to take this time to take your criticisms into account and to further clarify what I meant in my last video. The original was an unstructured rant, and frankly speaking I don't even remember half the shit I said, but let's give it another go this time, but a little bit more coherently. This video will therefore be split into responding to the main points of criticisms brought up consistently throughout the comment section in order to tackle the subject more effectively with examples along the way. I'd like to take proper effort to frame this time around this whole video as an opinion, and these are just my thoughts on the matter. Before I begin, I would like to make clear that regardless of my complaints about this particular part of 1 D&D, I do not hate 1 D&D. I'm not boycotting it, and I don't think the whole thing is ruined, yet. I love Dungeons & Dragons. I played it on release with my uncle, and it was my first experience with a tabletop role-playing game. I have not stopped since, and I do not intend to stop. I'm incredibly excited about the upcoming release, as I think that it looks like an improvement for the most part, especially mechanically speaking. That being said, my criticism is from a world-building / lore perspective. The world that exists sort of out of the box, which the novels and other such media adaptations take form from. This world is free for you to change, of course, and I do not contest your right to do so. My criticism is therefore more centered around the changes made to this world in recent years. That is the focus of my complaint. And while the issue is not exactly gargantuan and that it doesn't exactly threaten the whole game, indeed some might even consider my complaints to be nitpicky and arbitrary, I believe it is important to raise concerns sooner as opposed to later. But for now, the game looks fun. It's not perfect, as it still has some mechanical clunkiness, in my opinion of course, which can be discussed later, but it looks fun, and that's the main point of the whole game, because if it's not fun, what's the point? Now, enough waffling, let's dig in. So, in the last video I brought up points on how the game had changed. Not necessarily negatively, but some of these changes were diluting the spirit of the game. The spirit in question being of grit and adventure as envisioned by Gygax. Admittedly, that spirit has changed. It is now a much broader system with quite a few alterations and additions being made since then. I do not, however, believe that it changes in any major way the crux of my argument. My argument is not about resisting change or discouraging creativity, but about maintaining a coherent and immersive world with consistent internal logic. While new depictions can foster diverse storytelling, they risk undermining the established histories, and thus far, Wizards of the Coast has not exactly given us a replacement for this history. Attempting to rectify potentially sensitive content from the past is one thing, but simply removing it from the game entirely, so we now have a blank slate, is not a solution. Evolution of lore and world building should respect the foundational elements that define it, not erase them from history, rather than simply just perhaps changing them. There was an argument that canon and lore change all the time in any game that claims to have it. This is an inevitable truth, as all things change as they evolve, and I never claimed that the game should not have changed lore-wise since its inception, as expecting a game to stay the same for 50 years is entirely unrealistic. Indeed, perhaps waffling about the art wasn't the best approach to the segment, as this thumbnail and the last one have Dungeons & Dragons thumbnails from the new rulebooks, and they all look fire. That being said, can you blame me when there's such a stark difference between characters lounging from 2nd edition compared to in 1D&D? There's literally a whole thing going on about how it might be traced off modern stock images, giving it an almost stiff-looking vibe. But listen, I ain't an artist. I can admit that maybe selecting 2 images and making that an entire point of contention is a bit much, so we'll see, especially when some of the art so far I really like. Key point being some. There was also an argument raised about why there should be a theme or consistent lore in a game that advertises itself as you being able to make the stories that you want. That's a fair point. They go on to say that you'd have to homebrew it to death in order to continue running it how you want to. The first thing in regards to that is, what kind of fucking campaigns are you guys running? that you have to tear out entire pages, like goddamn. Acting like the whole thing is downright unusable and you're ferociously ripping through the books, tearing pages out while screaming. I'd argue that the stories that you want to make can still work even if there is a consistent backbone or lore or whatever. Just choose not to use the stuff that you don't want to use. There's a difference between having a book which costs 40 quid, which has these options of things you can use but choose not to, and discuss with your players, in comparison to paying 40 quid for a new book that has simply taken your ability to choose whether you want to use it or not away from you. Yes, it still exists, it's just an absolute hassle to get all of these important bits of information together scrolling through DnD Wikidot. On top of this, there was a defense of the new changes made that it acknowledged the differing stories that people came up with and their homebrewed lore or such. I have a different viewpoint of it, not celebrating anything. Going back to the point that they've scrubbed entire parts of the development of the cultures within the Forgotten Realms out without any replacement. It's one thing giving us options to use existing lore and dungeon masters choosing not to. It's another thing pretending like that lore doesn't exist and brushing over it. Hell, after scouring through the Monster Manual, Volo, Bigby, Tome of Foes, Guide to the Multiverse, I found one entry on the orcs detailing the warlike versions that came through the Mascari portals. Nothing else, no description of any other variation whatsoever. None of the more peaceful variants, just slap them under one background and call it a day. And then we begin to see the issue with the depiction of the orcs. When the fuck and how the fuck did we allow this to be simplified in such a gross way? Anywho, we move. So then there are conversations on the modernization of the game concerning making the game less... oh boy. Alright, less racist, so that more players have the agency to act in a specific manner in relation to specific races. Firstly, I'm going to have to readdress the part about making the game less racist, as I believe I had said enough in the last rant about orcs. Unfortunately, some people want to see racism where there is none. Essentially, the argument made was centered around a quote from Tolkien in one of his letters that described the orcs as, quote, and then in brackets, to Europeans, end bracket, the least lovely Mongol types. It is argued that based on this quote that anyone familiar on the topic is uncomfortable with the idea of orcs being, inspired by these races, even if later iterations further strayed from the description with the horns and shit. The easiest way I can show the waffle at this point is to point out that first, show that quotes can look absolutely horrendous when you put them out of context. If you did that on purpose, that was a dick move, you clown, and if you did it by accident, then I would advise you to perhaps consider your sources more carefully before quoting them. Secondly, I'd like to explain what that quote means in exact terms, considering the aforementioned context, and then finally I'd like to point out an overarching problem with this sort of lens or viewpoint, which is evidence of a wider issue in this debate, pointing out how nonsensical it is. The quote used in this argument is written by Tolkien, describing the orcs as a response to a movie script, within which they portrayed the orcs as bird people. So, he's only describing the orcs relative with these characteristics to the people in question, because otherwise they were being portrayed as birds. Within this context, the quote makes a bit more sense. Taking it a step further, you can quite literally see that he spells out that an orc might look like, to a European perspective, a bit like the least lovely Mongol. That does not mean the orc is a Mongol. That does not mean that they are based off of Mongol. That does not mean that Tolkien envisions Mongolians and their subsequent descendants when writing them. Once again, with the context in question, he's purposely trying to attach some kind of relative humanoid characteristics onto the orcs, not for himself or his writing, but for the understanding of a third party. And that's also another issue with your quote. Tolkien never once described the orcs in any such way at any point in his works in relation to his works at all, as a Mongol or as African American, full stop. Quote, it's impossible for you to say the depiction of orcs didn't have a racist foundation when this was literally from the guy who cooked them up. From whom you took them out of context. Sure, he cooked them up, but he did it for the sake of not leading to orcs becoming bird folk in somebody else's work. And so this brings me to my final issue with this topic. When people say orcs have a racist foundation, that's a very broad term. What does that in exact terms actually mean? To have a claim, you need to know what you're claiming. Last time it was an entire contingent of people claiming that. Oh boy, I hate this X-coded terminology, but last time it was claimed that they were black-coded. Now that there's no evidence on that front, none whatsoever, the goalpost has shifted. Now we latch on to one of Tolkien's quotes describing it as Mongolian, despite the fact that it's been stripped of context, but the claim remains the same of it being racially rooted. My point here is that the level of inconsistency as to who it's actually racist towards, coupled with a lack of evidence or misrepresentation of such evidence, suggests to me, again, that there's no such thing. People see racism in here because they want to. They don't know how it's racist or towards who, as this person has clearly spelt out for us. Hell, I'd argue it's insensitive to conflate orcs being black-coded and orcs being based on Mongols into one big ball of racism, disregarding the differences betwixt the two ethnicities. You can't be racist caricatures of them both. They're entirely different ethnicities that you're attempting to conflate here. Then the rest of this argument starts beginning to talk about World War II and the reasons behind why it was fought, and it wasn't actually fought on racial principles, and brother, where did I talk about World War II being fought on racial principles? I mentioned World War I as being a reason why Tolkien was so against racism based on the South African apartheid that he saw, but I didn't say that World War II was fought on that basis. Tolkien didn't fight in World War II. Tolkien fought in World War I, so I don't know where that came from. It becomes clear then that the new form of orcish representation by Wizards of the Coast are an attempt at modernizing a perceived problematic topic, a viewpoint based on baseless imaginary evidence. But to be fair, book ain't out yet. Maybe we'll finally get a complete form of what these races stand for, rather than a picture of one kind of subspecies and then slam with a stat block of another. Maybe this whole rant is just an angry man on the tinternet, in which case, pay me no mind and continue about your day. As I said in the last video, and this video, it's a rant about a particular part of 1D&D, an opinion, and potentially a warning. Maybe if I'm right, I can come back and scream about my gift of prophecy. I have spoken about orcs so many times in this video, and if I hear it one more time, goddamn, it'll be too soon. I'm done with speaking about him, man. Jesus crikey. Now that I've blasted all my fear and anger or whatever the hell onto the internet, I can sit back and wait for 1D&D to form a more well-rounded opinion. Wait, hang on. There's one more comment I would like to discuss. See, for the most part, the comments were pretty respectful, reasonable arguments and criticism. However, there is one comment that got flagged and I saw later on being held for review that cracked me up. So, let's go over it together and point and laugh. This sounds... Bro, what happened? One opening! Holy shit! Incel garbage, old man. Okay, nice. Bro, do you see this shit? Cause what the fuck? Okay, so first off, old man, that's fair. I have been told by most people that I have grandpa vibes. But incel? What? Where? What do you mean? Hang on, let me look up the definition of incel again. Incel, a member of an online community of young men who consider themselves unable to attract women sexually, typically associated with views that are hostile towards women and men who are sexually active. Bruh, I didn't even talk about women, let alone sex. You are definitely swinging that word around as a blanket term to anyone that you don't like, because you clearly don't know what that means. And this next part just shows that you have selective hearing. When did I talk smack on the homo dwarves? When did I talk about no gayness in Dungeons & Dragons? Dog, if you want to suck dick, go ahead, brother. I ain't stopping you. Same to all my women on women girlies out here. You go, girl. More power to you. I literally mentioned the dwarves as a passing comment and said people got pissed about that. And other people got pissed at the people being pissed. And then I moved on because I got nothing more to add there. Frankly, I don't really give a shit. But oh, it gets better. He applies the same logic to the people of color and says, not everything has to be Eurocentric, man. Unless I'm a white supremacist and a crybaby. Buddy, please tell me when I said about no people of color in Dungeons & Dragons. Bro, the human race is right there. Play an ethnic minority human, I don't care. Unless you're saying people of color need to exist as orcs or drow or tieflings, in which case, are you good, bro? I don't want to have to use my trump card, but let me whip it out real quick. Go power transformation. Sorry to disappoint you, my friend, but I am unfortunately not a white supremacist on account of the fact that I am not white. I'm an ethnic Pakistani, British by birth. As a person of color, I would like to say that while your concern is appreciated, I do not relate myself to tieflings or drow or loxodons or those bird fuckers, because I'm a human. If I want to play a person of color, I'll play a person of color. Variant human is my favorite race anyways. Yes, call me basic, I don't give a fuck. Now, the most dire transgression he made, quote,
I allow...
Bastard can't even type.
Hate your emo avatar.
I didn't draw the avatar. I suck at art. A friend drew it. Now, disrespect towards me, I can tank that. That's funny. Disrespect towards my avatar? My icon? Gifted unto me from the heavens? Nah, you're taking the mick, you fucking ignorant dyslexic twit. What about my avatar is emo, huh? Motherfuckers see black and white and say, emo. Like, damn, God forbid I try and be a simple sticker to slap on the screen, you imbecile. You wouldn't know emo if it clocked you round the head, you cum-gargling, ignorant, silly bitch. You fucking... Oh, right. I just remembered YouTube doesn't like it when you go too far, and I don't know where the line is. And I don't want to get nuked yet, so I'm gonna call it there. Just, listen. Don't come into my comment section slinging this bullshit around with your buzzwords and catchphrases for no fucking reason. That goes for using words like, oh, you're an incel, or you're a Eurocentric white supremacist, you're a bigot, oh, this is all woke, and this is all bad, and whatever the hell. I want to go into the comment section and see what you think. Whether you disagree or agree, you have the full command of the English language to do so. These simplified one-word tags mean nothing now, because everybody just slaps the term around and sling it onto anything that they don't like. And as much as I love you for commenting and viewing and whatever the hell, I just prefer for that not to happen. respectfully. Anywho, that's the final thing I got on this particular set of topics. I'm not doing this shit again. Follow me on Twitter, or don't. Or join the Discord, or don't. Or subscribe. There's no other alternative.